My great-great-grandparents had 12 children, and mostly boys, and 5 of those boys joined the military during World War II. There's C.T., Park, Clyde, which is my great-grandpa, Sam, and Woodrow. Sam and Woodrow are still alive. I didn't really know a lot about him. He died like a month and a half before I was born, and you know, the only thing I know about him is like my mom. She talks a lot about him. Like they would spend every summer together, and like they went fishing together, and all this kind of stuff. She talks about him in the war like it was no big deal. It's like just a blip in his life. Like he wasn't a soldier by profession. That's just something he had to go do, and then he just went back to his normal life. I'm looking to relate to him. I never felt like I could. You know, he was in World War II, and that makes him a great hero to me, and because I didn't know him, I feel like I can't even relate to him as a person. It actually kind of hit me in the middle of listening to my great uncles that like they were there doing the same thing that he was doing, and they're just regular people, and I know them, and I can relate to them. So why should my great-grandpa be any different? I always had this image of him as, you know, in his uniform with all his medals and his metal helmet, running around with his machine gun, and any kind of battle scene where a guy is doing something heroic. I'm kind of like that, you know, that's basically what my great-grandpa just did. I'd expected to hear, you know, some kind of exciting story, or, you know, something that, hear things that they saw that maybe traumatized them, or something like that. Because, you know, I've been working with, you know, these other interviews of veterans, and all the veterans we've interviewed, you know, they've been in a prison camp, or their plane got shot down, or they saw all these horrible things in the Pacific, or, you know, there was some element of each one of them's story that was, you know, exciting. This past July I talked to Sam and Woodrow and interviewed them about the war and their experiences in the war, and it was just then, you know, it was a few months ago, I realized that they weren't actually in combat. To be honest, I was kind of disappointed. From what I found, he was just a regular guy, and he got drafted, and he had to do his civic duty, and he didn't really like it that much. And you know, he had 2 little sons that missed him, and he was a mechanic. He worked on cars, and he didn't even hardly see battle. When I started going through my grandpa's stuff, the very first thing I noticed was there's like hundreds of postcards. And I was like, wow, this is going to be like just a treasure trove of information. And I turned the postcards over, and there's nothing written on them. And I start looking through all these postcards, and they're pictures of Italy, like pictures of art, basilicas, famous places, statues, that kind of stuff. You know, I realized that if I had gone to Italy for any reason, I would have done, you know, the exact same thing. And you know, they had never been away from Arkansas, and so I can definitely see why they'd, you know, go do the tourist thing. Well, there's a ton of letters. Most of the brothers were married at the time, and I found a lot of letters from like the sister-in-laws to the other brothers, and the mom to the sister-in-laws, and they, you know, there's this whole big family connection of all these letters that my grandpa had saved. And then the other thing I found was Like the letters that my grandpa wrote home to his wife and sons, they were kind of boring. They were just like, hey, how are you? I'm doing okay. I'm still alive. Everything is good. And then he's always telling his two sons, my grandpa and uncle, he's always saying, be good for your mom and that kind of stuff. And it's kind of heartbreaking, these letters I found from my grandpa to my great-grandpa. I think my grandpa was about 8, and he's writing, my reading lesson is on page 60 today, or things that, he would have just said to his dad in a normal conversation, and it's in this little kid's handwriting, and it's really sweet. I don't think that they were intentionally trying to make the letters boring. I think that they kind of had to write that kind of stuff to make their lives seem more normal. If my grandpa saw something that was traumatic or horrible, I don't know that. I don't have any way to know that. If he did, then, you have to deal with these kind of big traumatic things. And one way to do that is forget about it and protect yourself from it, but also protect your family from it. You don't want your 8-year-olds to read about the horrors of war. They also had a lot of pictures of other stuff, of just them hanging out with their friends and working on their trucks and these good buddies that they had. At first, none of the atrocities of war or something like that. But then, as I flipped to the back of the album, there's these pictures of Mussolini hanging. My mom had told this story, your great-grandpa was there when Mussolini was hung. Well, I really didn't know anything about Mussolini before I started this project, and I'm studying this, and I find these pictures, and he's hanging upside down, and I was like, what's going on here? I thought he was hung. Why is he upside down? And again, I got this image of my grandpa hanging him, tying the noose, but I was researching this project, and I find out that Mussolini wasn't hung in a traditional sense. He was shot, and then the next day they hung him up by his heels. Yeah, but it was so cool that my grandpa was there, and he's circled himself in the pictures and stuff, and I've been reading about it, and I guess there was some debate over whether or not there were actually American GIs present at the time, but apparently there were, and not for the reasons that you would think. They were just there to see the spectacle. That's, I was reading on the captions on the back of the photos, and he was just like, yeah, me and my buddies heard that they were hanging Mussolini up, so we jacked a truck and drove over there. It's ironic because he had this, what some people would consider a really small part in the war, but then he's there for this huge event that the whole world sees. Well, when I started, I thought I was going to get to know these people a lot better. And in some ways, I did get to know my grandpa much better, but in some ways I didn't. I found out about this one section of his life, but this one section of his life didn't really define him. It didn't define the rest of his life, and it didn't tell me what he was like, except in this small, kind of extraordinary circumstances. While I may not have gotten to know these people individually better, I kind of feel like I got to know the whole generation better. In the middle of the project, I was getting kind of worried about it, and it wasn't going well, and I was like, these people are just regular guys. They didn't do anything exciting, that kind of stuff. And I pretty much just tossed that whole idea of the greatest generation out the window. These are just normal people. There's nothing great about them. But, as I've come to the end of this project, I do kind of believe it on some level. I think maybe the greatest generation is the wrong word for it. But, they did something extraordinary.